Thank you for tuning in to the Keto Answers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me this week is Luis Villasenor. Luis is one of the founding members of the Ketogenic community and head of Ketogenic.com, which is, in my opinion, one of the best resources for anything on a ketogenic diet on the internet. I learned from them, 5, 6, 7 years ago reading their content, and just tremendous amount of information covered in this episode. We talk about building muscle on ketogenic diet if it's possible, if you should do carb ups and when, the amount of protein you should be eating and why you shouldn't worry about it, and on and on and on. This guy is a monster. He's a physical beast, and if there's anyone who is proof that you can gain muscle mass and be bodybuilder on a ketogenic diet, is Luis. So if you want any of his tips and tricks, just tune in, and I hope you enjoy. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to chat about our sponsor, Perfect Keto. Perfect Keto is all about making a ketogenic diet healthy and accessible. Whether you're reading all of our online guides or articles or enjoying Perfect Keto's exogenous ketones or any other keto-friendly products, everything you need to make keto work for you is at perfectketo.com. I know what you're thinking. Hey, aren't you the founder of Perfect Keto? Yep, that's right. And all of my insanely high standards have been put into making each and every product. My background as a functional medicine clinician helps me craft the cleanest and healthiest possible products and best information about a ketogenic diet. Head on over to perfectketo.com to learn anything you need to know about the ketogenic diet. And if you've never tried any of our products before, feel free to use the code KETOPODCAST for 20% off your first order. With that being said, let's get into the show. All right, Luis, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, hello, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
I've been reading your stuff for a very long time, before even I started Perfect Keto. And you guys, you and Tyler and the Keto Gains community have been kind of at the forefront of this for a very long time. Can you just kind of explain to people what you're doing with Keto Gains, how it started, and how you got into this whole thing?
Sure. Well, it's quite a long story, but the abridged version is that, I think most everybody, I was fat or overweight as a kid. I decided to do something about it. I did a traditional thing, counting calories, doing lots of cardio. Didn't work that well, even though I did drop a few pounds. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I was I was a kid in the 80s. I'm almost 41 years old. So I was very influenced, by comic books and Arnold Schwarzenegger, etc. So I wanted to look like those guys. I said, what do I have to do to look like them? So I started strength training, I think most everybody in their dad's basement. I started to buy fitness magazines, try to understand. And this was a time where there was basically no internet. So everything that I had to learn was either by magazines, which, as you know, normally they don't have the correct information. And then eventually I transited to buying some biochemistry books, nutrition books, etc. So I could say that I'm a self-made fitness nutritionist in a way, even though now I have certifications and studies and everything. So I started basically experimenting on myself, and eventually this led me to a low carb diet, which is what most bodybuilders use for contest preparation. And because I came with a fresh mind, so to say, I was really not full of myths or paradigms in regards to nutrition. So I was not like, you need carbs to train. Like, I just did my thing. And eventually I started to get results. And people really, I never knew that I was doing keto. Like, I was just doing a traditional bodybuilding diet, but my diet was very low on carbohydrates, adequate on fat, eating whole foods. And eventually, let's say that internet came and got popular. And I was browsing one day, one community that is called Reddit. And I found that they had a board, that was just for people who were doing a ketogenic diet. And it was, this is very much what I do. And I remember that there were some guys questioning about strength training on keto. I started commenting, helping them. Then when I posted my pictures, we were like, whoa, so you can actually do the bodybuilding thing on keto. And was like, yeah, this is what I do. And, got a lot of questions. And eventually, from answering a lot of questions and then doing more research on my own, I decided to build a frequently asked questions board, which over time it became the Keto Gains Wiki. So it's like, if you print it, I'd say right now would be 300 pages worth of knowledge, which we try to review and update every now and so on, like to keep the most data updated research. So we use a lot of science and evidence. It's not just the it works for me thing. I try to keep everything very ground-based, easy to explain, but we always try to double-check evidence. It has to be, everything that we recommend has to have a ground on science and not just on one, with one version. It has to be actually something that is proven.
Got it. And you said that you were starting to do a bodybuilding type of diet, but very low in carb. Is that something that you came up with yourself? Because that's a very non-traditional approach, especially from your age group. I think that, I mean, even some, I just turned 30, and I think that I was kind of went through the same exact phase as you, where, a little overweight when I was younger, started training in garages and stuff like that. And what I was recommended by everybody in that fitness circle is that carbs were a must for gaining strength and mass. And so was it that all the reading that you did led you to the path where you formulated your own diet, or was it recommended to you?
No, basically it was, like I said, because I was bound to paradigms. If I read a magazine, it said, oh, you need carbs, you need fruit, you need whatever, right? But for me, that's something I really don't like. I normally, my diet gravitates more toward a keto paleo approach. I would normally eat lots of salads and greens. I don't really like that much starches and sweets, and so unless it's a chocolate, I'm not really someone who eats a lot of desserts, right? So, and I'm also not a guy who eats lots of bread, etc. So that's how I ate, and I found that every time that I overate carbs or follow the traditional bodybuilding protocol, instead of looking better, I just looked worse, and my energy levels really didn't change that much whether I was doing my thing or I followed the traditional protocol with more carbs. So I said, okay, so if the benefit from using more carbs is just the energy and having a higher, looking bigger and growing bigger in a way, but I'm already getting results, and I'm really don't want to go stage ready. I just want to have a good looking physique. I'm okay with probably having slower results. But then again, the slower results were not so slow. So it was like, okay, it's a catch-22. I really don't need to go over on carbs as long as I get adequate nutrients from whole foods, which I'm already getting. And then from my understanding at the time, you build a muscle by strength training and protein, which now if you look at the evidence is basically what you need. Then I said, well, but I don't need that much of amount of carbs. So again, I got the results, and people would tell me, but you're going to get tired. Well, I'm not getting tired. But you would be bigger with carbs. Well, I'm already quite big. So again, everything was moot point, and it was just moving the goalposts. Like, I've been doing my thing and improving, and I have the science to support it. We have the results from clients that the protocol works. So again, it becomes more of a thing of a choice. Right. Of course, probably you could get more results or faster results, or probably get a little bit bigger with carbs. But it really depends on your actual goals, what you want to do. Like if you want to do a bodybuilding show, and even if you want to become a pro, well, do what the pros do. I'm never going to go against that. If you are going to be a top-end athlete, or you want to go to the Olympics, do exactly what people who train for the Olympics do. But if you're an average Joe who only wants to look great naked, or you want to just get stronger, well, you can ingest carbs and still be in keto. There's a protocol called the target ketogenic diet. And the thing is that people confuse the amount of carbs they actually need to train. We actually don't need that many carbs. Like probably you can still be in keto with 80 grams of carbs a day, and you can get awesome results. And that's basically it. Like when we train people, for example, for CrossFit, I'd say a normal training session with 20 extra carbs a day, so that would be about 50 grams total. They do perfectly, and they're still in keto by any standards, right? And then you have someone who is actually competing on the CrossFit Opens, which we have some athletes. Even one of our coaches is an active competitor. She goes at most at 100 grams on the day of the competition when she is doing 2 or 3 sessions, right? And that's an incredible and huge amount of work. But again, for the normal weekend warrior or someone who trains 4 or even 5 times a week, probably using an extra 10 grams of carbs a day, it's more than enough.
Okay, so this is somewhere where I want to like pause and dig in a little bit. I hear a lot of stuff from people who claim that they have science based upon how physiology works, that to do explosive things and perform at a high level and doing, you know, CrossFit workouts and workouts like that, like Olympic lifting, for example, that the systems, the energy systems you run on require carbohydrates and cannot be fueled by fat oxidation and free fatty acids and ketones. Can you explain your experience there and what you've learned from a scientific approach applying a ketogenic?
Yeah. The thing is that they are basically right, but they forget about a thing called adaptation. So yeah, there are the 3 metabolic pathways. You know, there are the aerobic, anaerobic, and the phosphocreatine. So of course, if you are someone who is trained to to use carbs as a main source of fuel, of course you're going to be more dependent of carbs. And again, that to explain it to the audience in a very easy way, think of the gears in a car, right? So you have a very little fuel for probably 5 seconds. That's the anaerobic process, or even 10 if you are super trained. Then you may need a bit or little of extra, which is the aerobic one. And then you also have the phosphocreatine. So basically, they can overlap depending on what type of training you are doing, right? So if you are keto adapted or fat adapted, you can use the anaerobic faster in a way, because you can get more ADP from fat, but you have to have a higher mitochondrial density. You have to be adapted in a way. It's not something that just someone who has been on keto for 1 week can actually do. That's why you see a loss of strength or a loss of performance when you use first switch to keto for probably up to a month, depending on the person. Now, another thing to consider is that, yes, you need carbs, and that's what I was talking about before. There's a targeted ketogenic diet approach where you strategically consume some carbs around your training. So this helps a little bit with this, but here's another very important thing. Apart from the energy pathways, the main issue with energy on ketogenic diets, especially at the start and especially for very intensive training, apart from glycogen or carbs, is sodium intake. And that's something that it took me quite a while to get into Rob Wolf's head. But if you know Rob, Rob does a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
So about 2 years ago, when I first chatted with him, we basically chatted about this same subject. And he was using more so at the time a more paleo approach with higher amount of carbs. And since our chat, he started, wondering and experimenting on this, lowering a little bit more his carbs and increasing sodium intake, especially before training. And now he's like, okay, you were right. This approach actually works. And every time that I feel tired or lethargic, just increasing my amount of sodium, especially before a training session, does work.
What is the mechanism how that's working as far as explosive activity?
Okay, so yeah, we need the carbs, right? So again, it's probably between 5 to 20 grams. It can be depending on the person and the type of activity. But the sodium, as you know, there's sodium helps with energy, especially with hydration as well. So when you sweat, as you know, probably if you are dehydrated, as much as 40%, even 60% of performance. So when you start keto, or if you are doing keto for quite a while, but you have not really tackled this subject, you lose a lot of water and electrolytes actively. So that's something that you have to be supplementing and reviewing. And some people really don't feel anything, but some people get hit very hard with what is known as the keto flu. and this affects a lot of performance. So people think that electrolyte things is just for probably someone who does keto, like we know it. But if you actually take a look, that's why we have Gatorade, right? That's a performance enhancer. So it's very much works the same on keto. The thing is that on keto, you are already depleted past normal levels. It takes quite a while, like I'd say years, for people to get that sorted off, or adapted. Like, for example, in my case, when I started keto, I also felt the same and started making my mix of, I would call it the keto rate, which is basically I bought Power at Zero and then I added extra sodium to it, and it made me feel incredible. And that's something that I keep doing more so with a natural way. And I sometimes use Power at Zero, sometimes I use my own mix. But, for example, I do add sodium to my coffee, especially before training.
Got it.
And that helps immensely. You can actually feel, this is not something psychosomatic, but you can actually, it's something that you actually feel. It's very much like, you can last longer in your training, or you need less rest between sets.
Right. And so what I heard is essentially two different things from people who are a little skittish about this topic. Is that one, it takes actual time. I think this is one of the things that people don't understand when they just think about a ketogenic diet. They think that if you register blood ketones in 2 days, that your body should just be using them. But what I like to explain to people, and I'm sure that you do the same thing as you just kind of did, is that your metabolic machinery actually needs a change. Your mitochondrial density needs to change. Your mitochondrial efficiency, receptors on cells to take ketones into the cell to use for energy needs to change. And so there might be a dip temporarily. In this first phase, do you recommend people, for instance, go completely ketogenic and not do any kind of cheat meals or any type of carb ups? What I've noticed is people in the first month to 6 weeks go very strict. They have more of a metabolic flexibility for a longer period of time following that, rather if they were to just do a week here, a week there, a week here. Have you noticed a similar thing?
Well, the thing that happens is I will answer this in two parts. The first thing is that people confuse having ketones in their blood or in their breath or urine with being in ketosis, and It's not necessarily true all of the time, right? So this is an example that a friend of mine came up with, and it's so far for me the best way to explain it. Measuring like fat loss, for example, with the amount of ketones you have in your blood or breath or whatever measuring system you're using is very much like determining the speed of your car by using the gas gauge. So what this means is people normally do keto, or most of the people start doing keto because they want to lose body fat, right? There are, of course, other objectives like increasing mental focus or treating a neurological disease or whatever. But most of the people who are doing keto or are attracted to the diets because they want to improve body composition. So they think, or they've read, or they falsely understand that the higher ketones they have, the more fat they're burning. And that's not necessarily true. Ketones are just a source of energy. So when you start the diet, it's very normal to have higher ketones. And this can be due to various factors, but usually it's because your body is actually at first not really well adapted to using the ketones. So you produce them, but you waste them. So you have them, for example, in the urine. That's why a lot of people see purples on their pee sticks when they start the keto diet. But eventually in 2 or 3 weeks or even more, they start to be less concentrated. And they think they're doing something wrong, or deviating from the diet, whatever, when probably they're doing everything correctly. And what happens is that the body is using them more actively. So of course they're wasting it. They're getting wasted less. The same happens with breath. On the other hand, on blood, it takes a little bit longer. But again, the amount of ketones you may have in your blood depends on various factors. One would be the amount of fat you are actually ingesting. Another will be the amount of body fat you have. And then also if you are exercising a lot. Because again, ketones are a byproduct of fat metabolization, and this fat can come either from your own body fat or from ingested dietary fat, right? So this is the first thing I would explain here, that having high or lower amount of ketones does not necessarily determine whether you're losing fat. Then another is in the case of strength training or performance or whatever, again, if you are ingesting enough calories, especially nutrient-dense calories, some people have experienced, especially those that have been doing keto for quite a while. For example, myself, Tyler, Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, and many others that I've talked with that are into strength or performance and have a lowish body fat level all year long. They seem to be always on the lower spectrum of ketone levels by blood. And then again, why? Because you have a lowish body fat. You are not really overeating huge amounts of fat. You're just, maintaining or eating what you actually need. And then because your body is quite adapted at using the ketones as fuel. So basically, just as about the time you are producing them, you're actually using them. So there's really no buildup of that.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you eat super high protein or you eat low protein. We've all of the people I mentioned done experiments where we eat 250 grams of protein a day, or we go as low as 50 grams. I've done that myself, and I have the same amount of ketones on my blood always. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm always between 0.6 up to 0.8. Unless I probably fast forward 2 or 3 days, I would get a little bit higher, or if I use exogenous ketos. But outside of that, that's basically, or that has been my threshold for the last, let's say 3-4 years since I really started checking with blood.
Right. That's exactly my levels too, no matter what I do as far as ketogenic diet. Unless you said, like, if I jack up the MCTs, if I do some exogenous ketones, it bumps up above that. But I am pretty much right in that 0.6 to 0.8 range, no matter what I do.
Exactly.
And also, I just did carnivore diet for 6 weeks, and I'm back kind of on a modified version of it. But even with that, I was, like you said,
the same.
Some days I was 200 grams plus of protein, and I'm not nearly as huge as you. So I was like, okay, this is going to, if gluconeogenesis is a thing, we're eating too much protein will reduce ketones, like this will do it for sure. And it didn't. It was the same 0.8 day after day. So, okay. This is really good information.
Also a very interesting topic regarding gluconeogenesis. People think that if they eat, protein, they will automatically turn into chocolate cake, and they will drop out of keto, or they will start getting fat. And again, this is also why we changed our tagline a few years ago. Like, we are ketogains, but we really don't chase ketones, because it becomes moot point. Like, people come with us because they want to improve their health and the body composition. So we are going to put them on a protocol that, yes, it's going to be keto for most people, but it's going to get them results. We are really not going to be worrying if they have a 1.2 millimoles of ketones in their blood or whatever, because we have that question all the time with especially new clients. I don't have high ketones. Yeah, but you already dropped 10 pounds. That's what you hired us for, right?
Right.
And you're feeling great, and you're looking great, and you're getting more energy. So stop worrying about chasing ketones. Stop worrying about chasing the fat macro, and let's concentrate on keeping doing what we've been doing for quite a while, because that's what you actually want. So if you have high ketones or low ketones, it doesn't really matter. At the end, it's going to be something that it's very individual based, and depending on a lot of factors, which probably we cannot really control very well, but we can help you to prepare a better diet and to improve your performance. And that's something that you can actually measure, and it's going to have a great outcome.
So then you also said that for performance, adding in for yourself all the sodium, and then for Rob, for instance, he wasn't doing that, feeling he was a little sluggish, and that helped a lot of his symptoms. Is there an amount or a type that you'd recommend for people who want to toy around with this?
So basically, it's very funny, but So for our clients, and it's open, this is open source, let's say it on Ketogenic, it's something I openly recommend to everyone. It's not a trade secret. It's something that I call the Ketogenic coffee. So first, even though I'm a fan of intermittent fasting, and I did an experiment for about a year when I only ate one time a day. I did basically OMAD. I don't really recommend it to clients, and I don't do it anymore because I'd say it's good for maintaining both strength and a good physique, but it's not good for gaining. You're not going to win, or you're not going to gain considerably lean mass while doing one meal a day or training fasted. So going back to the protocol, is basically ingesting 20 to 30 grams of good quality animal-based protein, not collagen. It has to be preferably whey, egg, beef, casein. Well, casein won't really work in that case, but again, as a fast-absorbing protein, so between 20 to 30 grams, depending on the weight of the person. Then MCT powder, which it's funny, but my favorite one right now is matcha MCT powder. So it's gonna sound probably like an endorsement, but that's basically what I use because of the flavor. And a little bit of that's optional. Creatine, if you want to, that's again optional. 1 to 2 grams of sodium, and I pour all of this in coffee for the caffeine. So it's it tastes like a matcha tea or matcha coffee in a way. And you take this about 20 to 30 minutes before training. Now, if you're going to be doing high intensity training, or you actually feel you need carbs and you have a lowish body fat percentage and are insulin sensitive, you can add a little bit of dextrose to it. So between 5 to 10 grams. Normally, we have our clients with about 5, and that's basically to increase energy, but also muscle protein synthesis. So this is very much on, I can send you a graphic later from a study, but basically, when you train, you give your body to build muscle, right? So, but you also destroy a little bit of muscle. So if you have the available substrates, which would be protein and a little bit of glucose, you actually build more muscle after the training session than if you had not ingested anything. That's why I'm not really a fan of fasted training.
Got it.
In a way, to explain it again very easy, it's like you turn on a machine, but you don't put in the materials in it. Basically, that's how it happens.
Right.
And it's better for the net result to raise a little bit the insulin before you train. That's also one of the ideas behind having the protein before, and also a little bit of carbohydrates, not just for the energy thing, but to raise a little bit insulin. Because people think, oh yeah, carbs are necessary, like we talked at the beginning, to build muscle. But in the end, it's not really the carbs, it's the insulin. And people forget that protein itself also raises insulin. So then it makes the carbs redundant.
Right, exactly. And I think that people don't realize that even fat to some degree raises insulin. And like, I think combining those two things, like you said, 20 to 30 grams of protein, 5 to 15 grams MCT oil.
Exactly.
I think that's enough, and maybe even 5 to 15 grams of dextrose, probably if you are doing
that's more
stuff.
than enough. And here's the deal. Even if you are eating at a deficit, this shake would probably give you between 150 to 200 calories. And that's more than enough to actually get you enough energy to build muscle. People think that when they're, going to build muscle and say, I'm going to do a bulk, and they eat 1,000 extra calories. 6 months later, especially talking about the pros, you look them and they're in the dreamer bulk, right? They got fat. They didn't gain strength. Probably they gain strength, but because of the weight to muscle ratio, because you can move more things the heavier you are. But they really didn't gain a considerable amount of muscle. They just look bigger because they got fatter.
Right.
But if you actually look at studies and also from best practices and experience and top trainers right now, what they actually put someone when on training days, it's about, depending again on the weight of the person, between 150 up to 500 extra calories. For the average person, that would be about 200. So basically, you have your off days, which you calculate, and then on the training days, you just take the shake, and that's more than enough that you're going to need to actually build a considerable amount of lean mass without going overboard on calories. And the great thing about the MCT is that it's not just a gimmick. As you know, it's absorbed super fast. So it doesn't, first, in my case, it doesn't bloat you. You don't feel heavy. But again, it's a fast-acting energy, differently to if you ingested just, butter or other thing.
Right.
This gets absorbed basically since the moment it hits your tongue and via the lymph nodes and etc. So that's something that you actually can feel. I've had, I don't know if it happens to you, but some people and even myself, if you ingest quite a bit of it, you actually feel hotter.
Yeah, I've noticed that actually.
Yeah.
So the sodium, what type of sodium are you taking in and recommending to people?
This can vary a little bit due preference and availability, but people think normally that sodium equals to salt. And it's not that the case. Depending on the type of salt, it has different amounts of sodium in it. So if I recall correctly, for example, Himalayan salt would be about 45% of its weight on sodium or something like that. Don't really quote me on that. Sea salt would be a little bit less, I think. I don't know the numbers by heart, but they go about like that. I myself use either Himalayan salt or right now I have a batch of Peruvian Mara salt, which is very much like Himalayan salt. I like that better because of the available minerals it has. It's not just sodium, but it also has a lot of other minerals. And I like a little bit more the taste. But you can actually use any kind of salt. So I use either that, and I also add a little bit of Morton's low salt or light salt, which is basically potassium. That helps a lot as well. The taste is milder, but it's basically more potassium. And this is something important that people have to understand. It's not just adding sodium. Adding a little bit of potassium, but not from pills, just from this kind of salt, also helps a lot, because I also remember that there's a thing called the sodium potassium pump, and that's very important for cell hydration.
Great. And so are you doing 1 to 2 grams of the salt or 1 to 2 grams of calculated sodium, so 2 to 4 grams of salt?
So in this case, I say people to experiment. So what we normally suggest to our clients is to aim for 5 up to 7 grams of sodium throughout the day. And 2 of them would be ingested in the pre-workout if it's very hot, if they are tired, if they feel they actually need it. That's what I myself do. I try to get about 1 to 2 grams of sodium before training. You can either add that to the mix or just have it as a salt shot before. It really depends. People may not like the taste. I sort of grew accustomed to it, so it really doesn't bother me.
Okay. And so you said this is perfect for gaining mass and building muscle. What about for people who, when they work out, their intention is to lose fat? Or do you have any concern about
that? Would be very much the same. In the case of people who are just going to be focused on losing body fat, of course, first, don't use the extra carbs. You don't need them here. Let's focus on losing body fat. Just use the protein, and you can use the MCT oil probably between 5 to 10 grams. So you can basically, this is probably people who follow Ketogenic know that we really don't endorse very much, putting fat in the coffee, etc., or using a traditional bulletproof coffee, etc. This is a place where it's actually recommended because it would be, in a way, a bulletproof coffee, but with protein and a little bit of sodium, but again, before training. And it's not something that you're going to be having 10 coffees a day. It's probably just 1 coffee, 20, 30 minutes before training. And again, if you don't like coffee, you can use tea or you can just use almond milk, whatever.
Right.
I suggest coffee because the flavor, it's just the delivery method, but also the caffeine. Like if you look at people want a pre-workout And the main ingredient in most available commercially available pre-workouts is caffeine. So, well, just have a good coffee, add MCT oil, it's going to taste great, a little bit of a protein shake, and then you actually have like a smoothie or some like your indulgence time. And for us, it's also a psychological trick to get the people to go to the gym. Like, you have your pre-workout, there's no way that you're not going to go to the gym right now because you already wasted it, right?
Right. Interesting. So I know there's two camps, one that says that this is a good idea, and then one that says if you're trying to lose fat, there should be absolutely nothing you should do fasted training. Because if you spike insulin at all, then you're shooting off lipolysis, and the whole point of working out fasted is to generate more fat oxidation. What's your opinion on that?
That's a misunderstanding because, like, if you want, I can send you some recent studies that actually just throw that myth into the trash. You're not going to be burning more fat necessarily by training fasted.
Right.
And in the end, it's actually counterproductive because if you train completely fasted, depending on the training, you're going to, like, fasted training is in itself catabolic. It's basically what I said like a few minutes before. Your body is going to need energy. Yes, it's going to burn fat, but it doesn't burn fat exclusively. It also is going to use some aminos because it needs glucose. Your body always needs glucose, even if you're keto or not. It doesn't. What it does is just makes glucose from other available substrates, right? So if you train completely fasted, yeah, you're going to lose weight, but also at the expense of losing some lean body mass.
Right.
And this is why sometimes you have people who lost weight doing keto or doing fasting or doing whatever. But if you actually look at them way later, they only became skinny fat. They just became a smaller version of themselves. And what we have to make people understand is we are not just chasing a loss of net weight. We're chasing, or the goal is to lose body fat, and then this translates to an improved body composition. You lose body fat, you look better. You don't have to, again, just lose sizes or lose weight. Yeah, like it's funny, but this is something that we have to basically explain very carefully to our clients, especially our female clients, because when they start with us, some of them will even gain weight, but like they start freaking out, and then we go, okay, look at your measurements, look at yourself in the mirror, look at how your clothes fit. What's the net result? Well, I'm looking leaner. My clothes fit better. I'm losing inches. Then why the hell are you worrying about your weight?
Yeah. The mirror test is always good.
Exactly. You're probably gaining a little bit of lean muscle. You're probably eating more because people forget that, weight by itself is the result of various things. You eat more whole foods, for example, instead of being on a shake diet. Of course, food weights. It's not like once it gets in your mouth, it evaporates. No, like if you eat, 200 grams of meat, well, and you weigh yourself later, you're going to go up by 200 grams. If you drink 1 liter of water, well, you're also going to go up on weight by about 1 kilo or so. So people forget about those little things and they start freaking out and forget about actually looking at the results. It's not just weight. We have to look at the whole picture and then do a proper assessment.
Yeah, as far as the two camps are concerned, fasted and non-fasted training, I've always been on your side as far as in my understanding and my hypothesis around is that if you support lean tissue growth and maintaining and building muscle mass, that not only in the gym, but if you have more muscle mass, you're going to be able to move more weight and have more intense workouts. You're going to want to do more things throughout the day. That tissue is more metabolically demanding. And so investing into building lean mass actually helps way more in the long term than even, if you burn a little bit more fat in a fasted training state and have a net neutral or net negative effect of lean tissue mass, then I think you're going in the wrong direction when you look at things kind of in a longer spectrum.
Exactly. We talked this about at the beginning of the interview, but I'm not really a nutritionist. I actually studied business administration and marketing, and so I try to frame everything in a economic sort of view. So I always tell my clients that calories and macros are like money. same as nutrition. So you have to understand and try to invest them where they will yield the best results. So let's focus on the medium and long term versus on short term results. So in this way, it's very much like you said. Probably you're going to lose more weight if you train fasted, but at the expense of losing some lean body mass. If we actually, like, just by ingesting the 20 grams of protein, you're going to give your body the substrate to either if the body wants to use a little bit of amino acids, they are there, but it's not going to use your lean muscle to get the glucose or to get the amino acid it needs, right? So in the end, probably you're going to lose a little bit less weight, but in the medium term, in the long term, your basal metabolic rate is going to be more active, your NEAT is going to be more active, and thus you're going to be burning more calories passively just by sitting on your butt all day long, and you're going to look better, and that's what you actually want.
Exactly. So one of the things that you said, 20 to 30 grams of protein, most people on a ketogenic diet would go, oh shit, I can't eat that. That is, 2/3 of my daily protein intake that I learned from somewhere. And so can we just address quick and tear down this fear that people have that they need to limit carbs to 20 grams and then they need to limit protein to 30 grams or else it's going to turn into glucose and kick them out? I know we addressed it a little bit in saying that we've done experiments going, upwards of 200 grams of protein and not affecting it whatsoever. But I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons and ways to unpack this, but I just get maybe messages at least once a day with me posting stuff about meat and whatever and saying that I eat it and people asking, aren't you afraid that it's going to kick you out of ketosis? Isn't this the devil? And yeah, I just want your take on it and be able to pick this apart a little bit more.
Sure. Well, our recommendations are based on basically two things. First, Dr. Finney's and Bullock's suggestions and studies. And second, on what actually studies suggest would be the minimal amount for building or maintaining lean mass, right? So I'm going to talk in grams per pound, even though I remember that Dr. Finney and Bullock have that in kilos. So let's, this is my understanding and this is my hypothesis. So what we actually suggest for people who are sedentary is to stick to about 0.8 grams per lean pound they weight. Lean pound means your total weight minus your body fat percentage, and then you multiply that by 0.8, and that would be the amount of protein we recommend on a day-to-day basis.
Minimum though, right?
Yeah, probably you could go a little bit lower, but we prefer to just round it because if you go by Dr. Finney and Bullock's numbers, that would end up about 0.60 something, 70 something. So we just round it up to 0.8, right? Because it's easier to remember instead of saying 0.74 or 0.76.
Right. So what I want to pause to point out here is that I want to be clear to ask, this is a minimum, correct? Not a maximum. Because when people, I think, when they set macros for stuff like this, they think it's maximum, and that's like the maximum you should eat. But you're saying it's a minimum, correct?
That would be that would be the minimum. And then if you are actually strength training or doing any kind of training, well, by consuming the 20 to 30 grams of protein, for example, from the shake we talked before, you normally would go to what is our recommendation for trainees, which is 1 gram of protein per lean pound you weigh. The difference again is between 20 to 30 grams of extra protein. That for most people, even if you weighed 250 pounds, right? So it's very little. It's just the difference is a shake, basically. And again, the shake is really not mandatory. If you want to have those extra grams of protein from whole foods, it's perfect. You would just have to eat it not just 20 minutes before training, but a little much more, like 2 hours or so that it's in your blood by the time you're training. But again, it's just that's minutiae. So basically, those are our recommendations. And again, if you actually look at the books of Dr. Finney and Bullock, especially The Art and Science of Sports Performance, they actually go by those numbers again. When you train, you increase a little bit more protein. Again, that's about 30 to 30 grams. And that's on the take of a ketogenic diet. And now if you look at the science-based approach from non-ketogenic diets, there's also there are also some papers that support very much the same numbers between 0.75 up to 1 gram of protein per lean pound the person weighs. Or they go a little bit higher, but they use total weight. So we like to use lean pound because it's more exact. Because if you use total weight, then you may have someone who weighs 300 pounds, increasing a lot more their protein intake. And it's not necessarily that the protein will turn to chocolate cake and kick them out of ketosis, but more so that our approach in ketogenes is about optimization. So using your resources to get the best results. So using more protein will really not make you build more muscle. It's just a waste of energy. So you'd rather have that extra energy from fat in this case, for example, because fat is going to be more easily used as an energy source on keto rather than protein. Protein, you're just going to be wasting it. First, again, protein is quite expensive monetary-wise, just to be using it like that. Secondary, it's also metabolically expensive to get energy from protein, right? So It's just get the amount of protein you actually need to get the best results. Then the extra calories that you may need, they should come either from carbohydrates or from fats.
Exactly. And one of the things too, I think that people are afraid of is that protein may lead to creating glucose in the bloodstream. But if you understand how fat is broken down, there's a glycerol backbone of fat that when you utilize ketones, you're making carbohydrates, or not carbohydrates, but glucose. But that's desired. We want that, like you said, no matter whatever state we're in, we still have a requirement for glucose in our bloodstream. That's why when we go on a ketogenic diet, our blood glucose doesn't go from 80 to 0. It goes from 80 to 70, maybe 60 if you're doing a long-term fast. And it goes down a little bit because you're not using it for the main energy source, but you still need it in your bloodstream for basic functions. And yeah,
forget that you need that the body will always use glucose. They think that your body doesn't need. Your brain does need glucose. Some tissues in your body need glucose. We talked this before. Some types of sports are going to be more glycolytic. So basically what you said, the body can produce glucose either from amino acids or also from triglycerides. So basically that's what they are. They're like you said, glycerol backbones. They're basically small molecules of glucose bound together.
Right, and that's the thing that people, well, then they freak out and go, well, why don't I eat it? And this is the thing that, in my opinion, carbohydrates are non-essential in the diet, whereas fats and proteins can. You can't just make fats and proteins from the body like you can with glucose.
Exactly.
And so that's why I think that if we look at structural components, we're not using carbohydrates to build new cells and provide foundation to your body, but we do use that for fat and for protein primarily throughout your body. And so the leftovers of that production, you get all the glucose that you need.
Exactly. Well, now, people normally would say here, like you said, then why am I doing a ketogenic diet? So what's the advantage? And how I explain to them is that, we require glucose, we require carbs, but not so much like we are actually eating or we have been eating since the 70s or the 80s. And to put it in a very easy way to understand, let me know if it makes sense. I explain to people that imagine that like if you were in a video game and you have your life bar, right? So you have your, let's say your protein bar, your carb bar, and your fat bar. Those are the energy sources in a way. So right now, in this day and age, people overconsume carbohydrates. So you actually always have your carb bar filled. You're never going to use your fat bar ever if you always have your carb bar filled. People who are metabolically flexible can use both at the same time. People who have insulin resistance or who have become insulin resistant or who actually eat all the time, especially carbohydrates, they're always filling up their carbohydrate bar. That's why it makes it very hard for them to lose weight because they're always using the energy from the carbs and they're not actively using the fat. They're just accumulating fat. And even if you look right now at the food that is available, or a lot of the food, it may go like it's zero fat or very little fat, like, or low fat, but it still has 1 or 2 grams of fat in it. And what happens is that people overeat on those foods because they think they're fat-free. They're getting lots of calories from the carbohydrates. Again, they're filling up their carbohydrate bar, but they are also filling in a way their fat bar with 1 or 2 grams that are accumulating and are never going to be used. So what would you do, or the advantage of a ketogenic diet in a way, is that you deplete this carb bar so that you can actually start using your fat bar. I don't know if it makes sense, or I just went overboard.
No, totally makes sense to me. And this is the thing, like the switching back and forth, people think that they need constant energy from the glucose, and you're gonna get some production from that from your fat metabolism. So as you start using fat, you will generate glucose to be used. And I think that this is important to highlight for people. One of the things too that I wanted to ask quick about carbs is that in the community that I've seen from people who do bodybuilding and do a lot of weightlifting or strength training and have never done keto, but think that they're going to try it, start off with doing like 1 or 2 time week carb ups where they do like 200, 300 grams of carbohydrates. What is your thought on that and how that affects either gaining lean muscle mass or performance?
I think from experience that it's counterproductive.
Right.
When I started keto, I used to do that, the carb loads. I started doing that cyclical ketogenic diet. And from my experience, and now also again based on research, what happens is the following. Physiologically, you're going to feel very much like shit because especially when you're new to keto, you may take 2 or 3 days to get into ketosis. So probably, let's say that you start on Monday. You're going to be really in ketosis by Tuesday, for example. Then comes Saturday, and you do this big carb load. Again, you have to deplete the carbohydrates mainly from the liver to a point to start generating ketones. So again, it becomes like a cycle where first you're just going to be in keto for 1 or 2 days at most, and you're going to be carbing up. So first, regarding the carvings, people think that it's eat pizza and ice cream and whatever, like a cheat meal, and it should not be like that. A proper carb load, speaking for bodybuilding or even other types of training, is just eating very low fat and high carbs. And you actually have a protocol where you start probably with fructose as to stop ketosis immediately, and then add probably high glycemic carbs and then starches as they go along. So it basically becomes like a rice and chicken diet, or probably even some starches or so. It really depends. But it's not like the most palatable diet. It's not something that people actually look up to. It's, again, not ice cream and pizza and such.
Right.
So that's a proper way to do a carb load. But again, the carb load should not be done every weekend. Like someone who is new to keto should do strict keto for at least a month. And then probably once, if you review that the person is a little bit adapted, then you can probably do 1 carb load a month, or probably 1 every 15 days. In my experience, what happened was precisely that. I started doing it one time a week. Then I really didn't find it. First, I didn't like it. Second, I really didn't feel that much difference energy-wise. So I started like spreading it to every 15 days, then every month. Then I basically forgot about it. And that's why I said, I don't really need carbs. I feel worse with them. So like if I want to have like an off day, I would have it. But it's like, I still do, it's probably like 5 or 6 times a year, and they are very much planned. And it's, again, for a meal, probably not just for 2 weeks or one whole day, right? But it's not really for the sake of carving up. I really don't do that, and I don't recommend that. Right. And then, again, even though if you're adapted, there's a thing, as you know, there's this thing that people say about keto, that they are muscle sparing, right? so that you actually you don't lose muscle when you do a ketogenic diet, because ketones are muscle sparing. So that's true in a way, but it happens only after you are sort of adapted. When you start the diet at the start, you actually do lose a little bit of lean mass because your body wants glucose, as we said before. Your body doesn't know very well how to use ketones for fuel. So what will your body do? Well, it will take a little bit of glucose from amino acids. And where does the body get the aminos? From your muscles. So what happens if you do a cyclical keto diet at the start? Your body is not adapted, so your body will take a little bit of aminos from the muscles. Then you start keto, your body doesn't because your body is not very well adapted to using ketones. It will take a little bit of aminos from your muscles. Then if you go in and out of keto this way, basically you are never going to be adapting. And again, you're going to be using a little bit of your muscles here to obtain glucose. Otherwise, if you actually let your body adapt for a few months, probably you could do a keto diet, but a cyclical keto diet, but very much like I said, probably do a carb load every 15 or every 15 days or once a month, not something that you do every weekend.
Right. And
so in the end, it's counterproductive for bodybuilding to actually do the carb loads, especially at the start. And this is actually, there's a study on this that was first done on the University of Tampa. I don't know if it's published yet. And there's also a second study that corroborates this that was done, I think, I don't remember. If you want, let me, I'll research and send the notes later. But I think it was in an university on Norway. I'm very much it was there.
Yeah, I know what the one in Florida with so Ryan Lowry did that one,
yes.
Right? And yeah, I was chatting with him about it, and he was saying that it was a pretty remarkable strength and size decrease when doing the carb ups. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially how you explain it. Your body in the beginning is kind of confused. The way I go about it is I just let life decide when I'm going to have carbohydrates, and I don't freak out about it. So, for instance, I had a dinner last night with a friend, and we had a lot of sushi, and that was just I haven't eaten carbs in maybe 2-3 weeks, and I probably won't again for another 2-3 weeks. But I woke up today, I trained in the morning, I felt fine, and I think that now I have the ability to use both of these fuel sources and not freak out when my body has one or the other. And like you said, maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, but I just let life decide whenever that is. Exactly. Instead of trying to plan it out like, oh, every Sunday I'm going to have 150 grams of carbs, or else my training will suffer.
Yeah, it's if you do that, you actually become a slave to the cheat meals. And I have had clients like they're thinking, it's a cheat meal, and they're looking forward to it being Sunday or Saturday for the cheat meal. It doesn't work like that, especially if you have a lot of body fat to lose. It's just concentrate on the now and on following the diet, and think of the food that you can have versus the things that you cannot have. And I very much do the same as you. Like normally when I do deviate from the diet, it's not just on a dinner. It has to be something that it's really worth it, like a wedding or a big event where I know there are going to be, a dessert table or something that I have to try. And it's going to be just for that event, not like some people do that. I'm going to have a cheat weekend.
Right.
And then it becomes a cheat week, and then cheat month, and before you know it, they've probably gained all the weight they lost in 4 months. They gain that in a week, and then they feel very bad and depressed, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So that's why I prefer not to really endorse nor recommend cheat days in any way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that measure how far you are away from reaching your goals, especially if it is path dependent. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say you have 100 pounds to lose. The more you kind of are off track and don't go in the right direction, the slower it's going to take to reach that goal. That being said, though, I also don't ever recommend people to beat themselves up if they want. If there are other occasions that come up, it's just if you go off stray a little bit, it's just going to take longer to reach your goal. I don't really have too many path dependent goals right now. It's more so day to day. I want to feel great. I want my energy levels to be high. I want my mental focus to be high. I want to feel good. I want to have stable energy systems. So that's why I do it. And so for me, if there's a day here or there, it doesn't throw me off. I'm already I pretty close to where my goal is, which is just to feel good and not be overweight again. And I'm reaching those goals right now, and it's a great thing to be stable. But it's not like something where, in 3 days from now, if there was a situation that came up, I would just know and understand for myself that, okay, tomorrow maybe I'm not as sharp as the day before, and that's a consequence of this, and not beat yourself up about it or feel guilty if that happens. This, you're going to get better results if you go full on, like we said, and get through this adaptation phase. But also, like, you can still get results over the long term if instead of feeling guilty like you made a mistake or you fell off the wagon and it's hopeless. And I think that people on a ketogenic diet like really identify themselves with just being keto. So if carbs slip in, they really take it on themselves like pretty hard. And I think that removing that mindset has helped a lot of people that I've seen become successful over the long term.
Yeah, basically, I see this a lot happen on keto, but in any other diet as well. Is that like you said, people think that keto is an on-off thing. Metabolically, it is, but you don't have to be keto to lose weight. So the thing is that they drop out of keto because they had a bite of whatever, and because they think, or they have this mentality that it's all or nothing. They take a bite out of a cake and they say basically like, freak it, I'm going to have the whole cake because I already had one bite. So it's very much the mindset of imagine you are driving your car and you scratch the door and you say, to hell with it, I'm going to total it, right?
Right, it's insane.
Just because you scratch the door of the car doesn't mean that you have to destroy it completely. It's like, okay, you probably had a bite of a chocolate bar or whatever. Just shrug it off, continue with the diet as if nothing, and probably it's going to be 100, 120, 200 extra calories that you probably deviated versus 2,000 or 20,000 calories. It does makes a difference. And it's very much, again, going back to the investment or the money example. Like, if think that you are saving for a vacation, but every weekend you spend the money you should be saving on booze or a restaurant or whatever, something you don't need. Well, you're never going to be to have enough money in your account. It's very much the same.
Right, it makes a lot of sense. Does training, in your opinion, change on a ketogenic diet versus a carbohydrate-rich diet?
Not at all.
And how are you training?
Especially regarding strength training, it doesn't really change that much. Basically, for example, our training for our clients is basically the same on any diet, and we do lots of bodybuilding type workouts combined with powerlifting. So they're more like a power building routine training, and our intermediate advanced clients, you wouldn't believe the type of training they're doing. And again, speaking of women over 50 years, the main difference would be for someone who is probably a trained or seasoned athlete that is switching to a ketogenic diet. They need adaptation, and their performance at the start will drop. But here's something we tell our clients. If you're doing keto for fat loss and you are someone who is, for example, a trained athlete or veteran who does CrossFit or whatever, forget about hitting your numbers for a while, because let's focus on one goal. You cannot really, be the master of all things at once. You cannot have performance and fat loss at the same time. You have to choose one. We focus on that one. And then once you get to a desired body fat level, then we can start recomposition or increasing performance or whatever your goal might be. But first, we drop the weight. Like we have someone who is, for example, a female. She's over 35% body fat and wants to keep her marks, but also wants to be toned. Like, forget about performance for now. Forget about being on par with your teammates or whatever. Let's train this as off season, and let's concentrate on losing fat. And you're going to be in time, this is going to improve performance as well, because you're going to be carrying less dead weight. You're going to feel better. You're going to look much better, and then we can change goals. But you cannot really maintain the numbers you have when you're going to be, for example, on a deficit or when you're starting keto.
It makes a lot of sense. What does a day-to-day look like for you as far as nutrition and timing and training?
In my case, what I do normally is I wake up, I have a coffee. I normally eat after 11 or 12, have some eggs. Basically, that would be my first meal. Then I wait about an hour. I train normally for about 2 hours. Again, a combination of powerlifting and strength training, well, of bodybuilding style workout. After training about 2 hours later, probably have another meal, and likely before bed, I'd have another meal. So normally not necessarily before sleeping, but normally I do between 12 to 16 hours of fasting, sleeping plus my first meal. And that's basically how I work. And I basically eat whole meals, lots of green vegetables, chicken, beef, some pork, eggs, salmon, sardines. Those are my staples.
So as far as fat and fat levels you're getting in, is it mostly from animal products, or how are you getting in the bulk of your fat?
Fat mostly comes from the one that is naturally occurring in fats. In my meals. I really don't. I'm not a fan of adding lots of fat just for the sake of meeting fat macros.
Right. I like
it.
it.
Probably from MCT that comes in my coffee in the morning. I add the matcha MCT on my pre-workout shake. Also, it may have a little bit of MCT. Like I said, I eat salmon and sardines, eggs. The meat that I eat is either lean or has some fat in it. So in the end, depending on my current objective, I may end between 70 up to 120 grams of fat a day. I'm not even though I may look big, I'm not really a super big guy weight-wise. I normally weigh between 162 to 165 pounds. My normal protein intake would be 135, 140. That's normally what I aim for. So again, it's like people think super high. In regards to my weight, it's about 1 gram or a little bit less, depending on.
Yeah, which is not crazy, but not even close to what most people are ingesting in ketogenic diet, limiting, I've seen to 30, 40, 50 grams.
That's basically not what a kid should be eating. And this is also a misconception because people use percentages to adjust a ketogenic diet because they think that the diet has to actually be high fat. And I'm a very big proponent of Dr. Ted Naiman. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he coined the term that when your body is high fat, what you actually need is a low carb.
Right.
So basically what this means is, you don't need high fat to produce ketones. You don't need to ingest the dietary fat. Your body can perfectly produce ketones from your stored body fat. So if you want to focus on losing body fat, well, let your body burn the body fat. Don't feed more fat. So in terms of performance and strength training, you can actually use your own body fat, especially once when adapted, to get results. And you will even gain some lean mass. We have some clients that even at a deficit, they have their DEXA before, during, and after some of our protocols. And we've had calls from the technicians in the DEXA labs or places call us and ask, what protocol are these people doing? Because it's it's not normal to have overweight people on a big deficit, losing body fat and gaining 2-3 pounds of lean mass. And we're not talking about novice trainees. We're talking about people who have been training for 5, 6, or 7 years. So they are actually veterans, but it's just the combination of adequate protein, an adequate and well-formulated training protocol, and eating whole foods that is basically doing the trick.
Love it. I think that we've covered a lot of ground here, and I think that, just the conversation about protein alone, I think that it's going to leave a lot of people with some actionable tips. So I know you're a busy guy. I am too. So we're at about an hour here. Just wanted to wrap up and want to let people know kind of where to find you and all the things that you guys are doing.
Sure. Well, if you go to ketogains.com, basically that's our main hub. But if you want to be active with the community, just go to Facebook and look for the Keto Gains group. We're a very big and active group, over 100,000 members. And basically what we do there is Keto Gains is a free resource, not just for strength training, but again, for everything related keto. We don't really cater or help. It's not that we don't help, but it's not our scope to focus on illness. Like if you have someone with cancer or a medical issue, that's out of our scope. We can recommend you to other sources. We just focus on the overall body recomposition and overall health mindset of doing a low carb diet, not necessarily keto. And all our resources are for free. We help people for free. Now, if you want a more specialized protocol, or everything set up for you, specialized, or to participate in one of our boot camps, that we call it, you can join for them. And of course, those are paid for.
Awesome. And those are at ketogains.com as well.
Exactly. Everything is ketogains.com. And that's where you get information for everything. Or you can email us at info@ketogains.com.
All right. And what about following you on Instagram or Twitter or social?
Yeah, very much the same. Everything that you see Keto Gains is either Tyler or me, or like the company. So we are on Twitter as Keto Gains, on Instagram as Keto Gains. On Reddit, we have also board as Keto Gains, Facebook Keto Gains. Like everything you see Keto Gains is us.
Awesome. All right, Luis. Well, thanks a lot for the time, and I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Anthony.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.